I'm Elias Vance, and my trade is stillness. Not the stillness of a portrait studio, frozen in an awkward smile, but the true ultimate quiet that comes after the final breath. For 25 years, I have been a post-mortem photographer, a specialist in a dying art. People who know my work, the families who pay me exorbitant sums, whisper that I don't just capture the deceased, I somehow capture the peace that life had denied them. It's a bizarre reputation, one I've worked hard to cultivate and equally hard to keep mysterious. My camera, an antique wooden beast with a brass lens and a heavy tripod, is my confessional. The faces I photograph are my silent priests. My current commission was a tough one, a young man named Jasper Thorne, barely 30, a musician who died suddenly in his sleep. His family had flown me from the city, out to a remote, clapboard house where the air hung thick with the smell of old coffee and fresh sorrow. The hardest cases aren't the old ones, who died full of years, but the young, whose stories were clearly unfinished. Jasper was laid out in his own sunlit living room, dressed in a comfortable shirt, his hands resting by his sides. But there was a harsh, almost frantic tension in his jawline, a stiffness that even the mortician hadn't managed to erase. It looked like he was still arguing with death, even after losing the fight. And that, I knew, was why I was there. They wanted the argument to stop. They wanted peace. I started my setup, ignoring the heavy-eyed woman watching me from the doorway, his older sister, Clara. She looked less like she was grieving and more like she was guarding a treasure she was afraid I might taint. Her skepticism was a palpable, cold weight in the room, and it settled on my shoulders like a shroud. I knew she was wondering the same thing every client's family wonders. Why does he only photograph the dead? And more importantly, how does he make them look more alive in death than they ever did in life? I don't use flash. Never. Flash photography is a violence, a sudden, blinding burst that startles the subject, even a subject like Jasper. I rely solely on natural light, and the light that morning, filtered through the lace curtains, was perfecta soft, forgiving amber. They told me you would need the room to yourself, Clara said, her voice raspy, breaking the silence. I'd been working for nearly an hour, arranging Jasper. I had placed his beloved, battered acoustic guitar gently leaning against his favorite armchair behind him, and carefully positioned a half-finished mug of cold tea on the side table. A simple truth, I murmured, my eye pressed to the viewfinder, twisting the focus knob until the lens glass sang. In a room alone, the subject relaxes. He is dead, Mr. Vance. He is already relaxed. I lowered the camera, straightened up, and met her gaze. Her eyes were red, but they held steel, not tears. Respectfully, Mom, Jasper is rigid. He's clenching his fists under that blanket. His face holds the memory of whatever shock took him. He's not relaxed. He's simply motionless. Motionless is not peaceful. I turned back to my work. My process is a secret choreography, a dialogue with the deceased. I spoke to Jasper softly, telling him about the sun outside, the quiet of the morning. I lifted his right hand. It was cold, heavier than I expected, and placed it naturally over the spine of a worn notebook, as if he had just set down his pen to think. I didn't try to make him smile or even open his eyes. I just sought neutrality. Clara moved closer, hovering near the camera. I saw your portfolio online. The child in the blue dress, the old man with the pipe. They all look accessible. Like I could walk up to them and they'd tell me a secret. It's unnerving. It's honesty, ma'am. Nothing more. No, she insisted, shaking her head slowly. Honesty is what a forensic photographer gives. You give them back to us, but changed. In that photo of the old man, Henry, the family said he hadn't put his pipe down in 30 years, but in your picture, his hands were empty, resting on his lap. Why? Why would you erase the pipe? I paused, breathing deeply, the smell of dust and old wood in my lungs. The pipe was a habit, a shield. Henry used it to hide when he wasn't sure what to say. When I photographed him, he didn't need the shield anymore. I captured the man who finally had nothing left to prove. That answer didn't satisfy her. I watched her glance from my face to Jasper's, looking for the tell, the trick I was about to play. She was looking for a reflection of the future, something I was promising to the still shape on the couch. I returned my focus to Jasper. I needed to remove the memory of the shock from his face. I used a small, soft brush, the kind an artist uses for detail work, and gently brushed the skin around his eyes and brow. I was smoothing away the last residue of his living fear, the frantic why of his final moment. When I was done, the stiffness was gone, replaced by an expression that was indeed neutral, but also utterly, profoundly unburdened. He didn't look alive. He looked resolved. This was the moment, the final preparation. "I heard a rumor about you, Mr. Vance," Clara whispered, her voice lower now, almost confidential, but still holding that dangerous steel. "They say you don't just take the picture. They say you tell them something right before you open the shutter. Is that true?" I straightened the lapel on Jasper's shirt one last time, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It was time for the final act. I stepped back from Jasper and stood behind my camera, a massive curtain draped over my head and the lens plunging me into the soft darkness of the viewing space. I could feel Clara's presence pressing in on me, her eyes drilling into the black curtain, demanding entry into my ritual. "Tell me your secret, Elias," she demanded, using my first name for the first time. The shift in address wasn't friendly. It was a challenge, a demand for accountability. "Stop hiding in that velvet cave and tell me what you're doing. Are you a priest? A charlatan? Are you giving us a perfect lie? Or are you actually seeing something?" I pulled the curtain away and looked directly at her. She stood just a few feet away, her arms crossed, her face a mask of exhaustion and a raw accusation. She was the gatekeeper to her brother's peace, and I had to convince her to step away, or the picture would be ruined. "If you move 1 inch closer, Clara, I can't take the photo. And if I can't take the photo, you will only ever remember him as he is right now, unresolved. I'd rather remember him unresolved than remembered by a lie. That piece, you see, it wasn't Jasper. Jasper was frantic, chasing time, always worried about being late, missing a deadline, not being good enough. He died of stress, Elias. That piece is an emptiness. You're filling him with your own romantic nonsense so we can pay you and go home." Her words hit me hard because they held a truth I had struggled with for years. For a moment, I saw myself in her, fighting the finality of a loss that felt incomplete. I knew then that I had to give her the answer. I had to let her into the darkness. "I am not a priest, Clara, and I am certainly not a charlatan. I am a witness," I said, my voice low and steady. I pointed the lens toward Jasper. "When we are alive, we spend all our energy guarding ourselves. We hold back, we pose, we construct a personality based on what the world expects. We are never truly, absolutely present in a moment because we are always worried about the next one." I let the thought hang in the air. The light was shifting, starting to deepen. The moment was fading. "But when they cross over," I continued, my eyes fixed on her, pleading silently for her understanding. "The future is gone. The expectations, the worries, the bills, the need to impress all of it vanishes. The performance is over. And for a fraction of a second, the face is stripped of every single burden. What remains is a raw, pure, unburdened signal of the soul before the flesh completely forgets what it held." I stepped back to the camera, pulling the dark cloth over my head. I could no longer see Clara, but I could feel her presence. I capture the version of them they were always meant to be, Clara. The version that existed before fear and expectation took over his jawline. That fleeting neutrality is their most honest self, their most beautiful self. It's a gift they give us at the end. I waited. The silence was the loudest sound in the world. Then I heard the whisper of her shoes moving across the floor, away from the camera, away from my line of sight. She had stepped aside. The climax was over. Now, only the action remained. I took a deep, centering breath, my heart rate finally slowing. My hands were perfectly steady. I spoke to Jasper one last time, my voice a breathy murmur against the lens, an intimate instruction meant only for him, not for the ears of the living. It's done now, Jasper. Go home. I opened the shutter. The lens drank the amber light for a long, silent count. Click. I didn't waste a second. I broke down the camera, wrapped the exposed plate in its cloth, and walked directly toward the back of the house, where I knew the family had converted an unused laundry room into a makeshift dark room for me. The only light was the deep, bloody glow of the safe light. Clara was waiting for me outside the door, leaning against the frame, her composure finally shattered. She didn't cry, but the look in her eyes was one of profound fear. "What did you tell him?" she asked, her voice tight. "Nothing a living person would understand," I replied. Dipping the plate into the developer tray, I swished it gently, waiting for the latent image to bloom. It took a lifetime of 10 seconds. Finally, I pulled the plate, rinsed it in the stop bath, and held the negative up to the safe light. I looked at it first, letting the sight sink into my memory. It was perfect. I turned on a small white light on the wall behind me, illuminating the still wet print, and stepped back so Clara could see. Jasper, the musician, he was resting, resolved, his hand on the notebook. The stiffness was gone, replaced by that almost imperceptible line of absolute peace, a faint smile hidden in the corner of his mouth. "It's beautiful," Clara whispered, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. Not tears of sorrow, but something closer to relief. It's him, but not the him I worried about. "Look closer, Clara," I instructed, pointing to the photograph. Not at his face, but at his right hand, the one resting on the notebook. She leaned in, her eyes tracing the details. "The notebook, he always had that." "No," I said gently. "Look at the page." I positioned the notebook closed, but the photo shows the spine bent, as if he's just about to open it, or just let it close. But look at the fingernail on his index finger. See the reflection in it? In the photograph, Jasper's fingernail, clean and curved, held a minute, precise reflection. It wasn't the reflection of the window, or the chair, or the sunlit room. It was a single, tiny point of pure, searing white light. A light source that wasn't physically present in the room. That, I revealed, my voice almost a religious hush, is what I capture. It's not a lens flare. It's not the room light. That pinpoint of fire is the single moment of absolute clarity he experienced when the performance ended. It is the light of his own self, reflected for the first and only time, entirely unclouded by the business of living. I then pointed to the subtle, almost invisible area directly above his chest, where the light seemed slightly hazy, slightly distorted, as if something intangible had just pulled away from the fabric of the scene. The secret isn't in the pose, or what I tell him, Clara. The secret is that the only time a person is completely, totally honest is in the moment of departure. I don't photograph the dead, Clara. I photograph the final, clean exit of the honest self. I freeze that moment of pure truth before the clay settles back to earth and forgets the soul it held. Clara touched the wet paper, running her finger over the image of her brother's face, then traced the impossible white light in his fingernail. She looked up at me, the steel in her eyes replaced by an exhausting, serene comprehension. She didn't need to ask why I only photographed the dead anymore. She finally understood. It was the only time the person didn't lie to the camera. It was the only time they were ever truly there.